A few weeks ago, someone gave me, they had an extra copy of the book that James Comey recently published, and I read it and enjoyed it. But the part of the book that I really remember, and which I really found fascinating, was Comey's explanation as to why Martha Stewart went to prison. I've never watched Martha Stewart, and I don't bake cookies, but I know she went to prison, and I never really understood the full reason for it. She was involved in insider trading, but for her, the amount of money that was involved in the insider trading was, well, $50,000 is a lot of money to me. Maybe a lot of money to you, I suppose it is. But for Martha Stewart, I mean, if I'm going to go to jail, I'm going to go to jail for millions and millions of dollars, not $50,000. I mean, for her, she has an empire. $50,000, she could lose that. She would never miss it. The judge had that all, if that had all been all that was about, probably would have given her a stiff fine and sentenced her to make Girl Scout cookies for a long time. But that's not why she went to jail, according to Comey. She went to jail because under oath she lied. And Comey says in the book that can never be taken lightly, because our whole judiciary system of justice and our whole meaning and purpose as a people, as a nation, is predicated on finding the truth in court. And if we don't value that, if we don't hold truth-telling at a very high level, we're not a country. We're a banana republic. We're nothing. We're not this great United States of America at all. And so it's a very serious thing to lie under oath in our country, in our judicial system. The 9th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, actually originally comes out of this understanding of a court of law. And it's basically, in its original first intention, a commandment to protect the poor from the power of the rich. The rich and the poor must always and both be treated fairly and justly. And so to protect the poor from the greed of the rich, taking land and money and possessions, the 9th commandment was originally given to protect. But then, as you have learned, as we've walked through these 10 commandments, they mean more than they say. And each of the commandments then begins to take upon itself a life beyond just the bare minimum of what the commandment meant. And so when we get to the prophets of the Old Testament, as you read through Jeremiah and Isaiah and Amos and all of those great prophets of the Bible, they cry against truth, falsehood, untruthfulness, lying. Over and over again, they inveigh against the people. You are not telling the truth. You've got to tell the truth. God calls us to be truth tellers. And then when we get into the New Testament, the words we speak become even more valuable. Jesus in the Matthew's Gospel says that there will be a last judgment, that we will stand before the Lord, and get this, we will be held accountable for our speech. for what we have said. In the text in Matthew's Gospel, Jesus says, for every careless word, we will be held accountable. Other translations use other words for that word, careless. Some use the word idle word. Some use the translation empty words. So you see, it's very important how we speak, what we say. From beginning of the 9th commandment to bearing false witness in court, now by the time it gets to the New Testament, it's every word of our lives has eternal weight and meaning and purpose. And we are called to be people of gracious speech. Emily Dickinson, the wonderful American poet, once wrote in one of her poems, tell the truth. Tell all the truth. Tell all the truth. But tell it slant. To tell the truth in a way that would hurt and harm is not truth that needs to be spoken. Whatever truth we say must be slant enough that we make sure we're not using truth as a weapon, as a tool to harm. Tell the truth, tell all the truth, but tell it slant. The wife stands in front of a mirror. She looks into the mirror. She has on a new dress. She looks at her husband. She says, do I look fat in this dress? Now, husbands know this. A husband has 4 seconds. If you don't say something within 4 seconds, whatever you're going that evening is going to be a terrible time. You're going to be miserable all evening. So within 4 seconds, you've got to have the answer. She looks in the mirror and she says, do I look fat in this dress? And the husband says, oh, I wouldn't say that at all. I think that's a very becoming dress. You should wear that dress more often. Tell the truth, but tell it slant. The truth is not meant to be a weapon, and our speech is meant to be gracious speech. Our language is meant to protect. It's interesting how these 10 commandments all work together. They fold into each other. They support each other. In the 6th commandment, we are to protect our neighbor's life. In the 7th commandment, we are to protect our neighbor's marriage. In the 8th commandment, we are to protect our neighbor's property. And in the 9th commandment, we are to protect our neighbor's good name, reputation in the community. I love that story about Abraham Lincoln, where someone comes to him one day, and I think this is probably one of the true stories. You're never quite sure about some of these stories, but evidently someone asked Lincoln what he thought about one of his generals. He had many generals, and some of them didn't do what he told them to, and I can't remember which one of these. It wasn't Grant. But anyway, he said, what do you think of this general? And Lincoln gave a glowing review, a glowing report of all of the good things about this general. And then the questioner said to Lincoln, Mr. President, do you know what he's saying about you? And Lincoln's answer was, I thought you asked me what I thought about him, not what he thinks about me. gracious speech. Tell it slant. You know, it's easy to say good things about the people we like, our neighbor that we like, relatives that we like, people who are nice to us, people that we admire. It's easy to say nice things. But to be able to be gracious to our enemy, to our adversary, to the one who is not saying nice things about us, that is not easy. That takes faith. And it takes courage. Apostle Paul, writing in, before I mention the Apostle Paul, did you listen to the reading about Miriam and Aaron? That's a great story in the Bible. It starts out by saying, if you listen to the first words of Numbers, that chapter that we read, Miriam and Aaron were talking against Moses. The brother and sister were talking against Moses. My imagination begins to go with that. I can see Miriam standing there with Aaron, and I can see somebody walking by and say, "Good morning, Miriam. Good morning, Aaron. Nice day, isn't it?" And Miriam saying, "Is it? Have you seen my brother Moses lately?" "Well, I saw him just the other day. I was walking by, and he was talking to some of the people outside the tent. Did you speak to him?" "No, I didn't speak to him. I just saw him there." "Did you see who he was with?" "Well, I did notice that he was with a woman." "Do you know who she is?" "I don't think she's a part of any of our 12 tribes. "Uh-huh. You see, she's black." "Well, yeah, I noticed that. Where does she come from?" "She's a Cushite woman. And now she's the missus." "You don't say." And you know what? He thinks he's such a big shot. He thinks that God only speaks through him. Who does he think he is? Doesn't he know, doesn't everybody know that God speaks through my brother and me as well? See what your imagination can do with you? Miriam got in trouble. That's not what you call gracious speech. Gracious speech is when we protect the good name of those that we are talking about. We protect their life, their property, their marriage, and their good name. That's why when this commandment gets to the New Testament, the Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Ephesus, says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful in building others up." What kind of a world would it be if that was the way we lived together? Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is necessary, important. Not to tear down, but to build up. That takes a great deal of courage, and it takes a great deal of practice. And you and I know very well how difficult it is and how often we fail to live up to that high standard of what speech is meant to be and how we are to live as gracious people. Language. But these commandments are not absolute. Some theologians talk about a lie to the glory of God. We don't always tell the truth, and we shouldn't always tell the truth. There are times that we lie for the glory of God. You know the stories of the Underground Railroad where they would hide runaway slaves in the cellar and they would knock on the door. Any slaves in this house? Oh, no. A lie for the glory of God. There are no slaves here. And in the last century, how many people in Europe, under those fascist regimes of Germany and Italy and those other places where Jews and people who were mentally or physically handicapped, gypsies, people of faith, how many times lies were told in order to help them find a way out, escape with their lives? There is a lie to the glory of God. Love knows the difference. When we use language to promote ourselves, that's not gracious language. When we use language to promote the reputation of somebody else, that's gracious language. You know, we don't have to promote ourselves. You know that? We don't have to worry about that. God takes care of that. God takes care of the place in the community that we're supposed to be. And sometimes God takes the person who's last in line and puts that person in front of the line. Yeah, God takes care of that. We don't have to lie. We don't have to promote ourselves. God does that. Our job is to speak graciously about our friends, about our neighbors, and about those who are not necessarily nice to us in our lives, as Lincoln did. I remember when I was a young pastor, we had a couple in our congregation. They were from the Mideast, Naim and Mary Muselli. They were from Syria or Lebanon. I can't remember which of those countries. They were the most wonderful. I guess they're in their 60s then or so. They were the most gracious and lovely, the most wonderful, and the hospitality that they showed to other people. They were in church every Sunday morning, and they lived actually in an apartment complex right next door to the church, and they never missed. They were such a beautiful couple. Naim and Mary Muselli. I think he worked selling carpets, which I always thought, well, that's a good thing to do. If you're from the Mideast, you probably know something about carpets. And one day, a glitch was discovered. It amounted to nothing. But it was a glitch in their paperwork. And this little glitch that amounted to nothing could have been dangerous to their staying in this country. We had a very brief informal staff meeting, but it was a no-brainer. We lied on a government form. We lied for the glory of God and to protect the lives of these two lovely, wonderful people. I've confessed and repented of many lies in my life. I suspect you have too. But I've never repented or asked forgiveness for that lie, for it was to the glory of God. Tell the truth. Tell it slant. Tell it with gracious language. Never use a word to hurt or to harm. God will take care of that. Speak the truth. Live the truth. Tell the truth. And sometimes tell a lie. Love knows the difference. Amen.